We'll go ahead and start with questions with Paul in the second row today.
Coach, now that three of the guys are official, just wanted to get your thoughts on Jalen Collinwood and Willie Burnett and Tristan Reed, just your thoughts on them signing and what they bring to the program.
Yeah, we're thrilled about the recent additions that we've made to our program. Those that have been following us and that know me, we're not, oh my God, over the moon about recruits. We love them. We offered them a scholarship because we believed in them. But we'll see when they get here and how they acclimate to this level and the demands that are placed upon them and the expectations that we have every single day. And they all know that. It's all been discussed prior to them making the commitment. But I want to be clear, like, we're very thrilled about what we've added for next year. We think we're in a great position that way with the obvious, the quality of play, but equally important, the type of young men that we're adding to our program. They got work ethics. They're about the right stuff. I think they're going to fit in very, very well to our culture, and most importantly, I think they're going to be improved. We keep getting better that way, and that's hopefully something that will continue with our high school recruiting. It continues to get better.
We'll go to Jacob to Coach's right.
Coach, you got another tough matchup on Thursday. What kind of catches your eye whenever you watch Kansas State on the film?
Yeah. Up until last night's game, they were number one in the country in three-point shooting. And it's like, it literally felt like every time they shot the three and went in, no matter who it was on their team. They slowed down a little bit last night in a win. But they're very, offensive-minded in terms of scoring the ball. They until again last night. They scored 80-something last night, but they had scored in the 90s, mid to high 90s every single game that they had played thus far, and so they got a lot of firepower. And it's not just one guy. Certainly, people will talk about Haggerty a lot, deservingly so, but they got five guys that are averaging double figures, and I think one of them comes off the bench. So they really spread you out defensively. They put a lot of pressure on you defensively. They push the ball. They play fast. And then in the half court, they get the ball in Haggerty's hands a lot. And we're familiar with him, obviously, with playing Memphis last year. And, he's the straw that stirs the drink. But at the same time, he's got a lot of running mates that can put the ball in the hole as well. And then defensively, they're sound. They're very sound. Some of their numbers may not look as gaudy, but they also play in very high possession games, so they can get skewed that way. But they're guarding their yard, if you will, and they got some connectivity to their team. They've got really good size around the basket, especially coming off the bench. And it seems like those guys that maybe aren't their leading scorers have really bought into their role identification and doing what they do best to help their particular team.
We'll go to Coach's left with Colin, first row.
Last week when you spoke, you said you wanted to see a lot, in the past week in terms of responding and pushing forward as a team. Have you seen that continue this week in preparation for this next road test?
I did see a lot in response. Unfortunately, we practiced better and harder than we did in parts of our last game, which is certainly not what you want. I don't think anybody wants that. The players don't want that. Fans don't want that. The coaches don't want that. Our opponents want that. And we've got to get them to, fix it. We've got to play, I want us to play like we practice, because I've said before, this is the best practice team I've had thus far this year and since I've been here. And usually that's a good sign eventually. But for whatever reason, as physical as they are and as competitive as they are, most of the time in practice, they're not, which you would think makes sense, right? Well, now we're going to play together, and now we're going to try to do it to someone else wearing a different colored jersey, which you would think they'd be excited to do that. And we've got to figure out how we can get them to transfer, practice into the games a little bit better. But we did see a good response in practice, and we had some good moments. And the game, certainly the last, 4 or 5 minutes, were not, and definitely spoiled some of the good things that we had done.
We'll go to Sam in the middle and then back to Danny P in the second row.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, how do you just feel about the state of the team right now as you're, 3 games into the season and have some results to kind of bank off of?
I mean, we're a work in progress, like I would expect us to be honest with you, with the newness. And certainly there's a lot of teams out there that have a lot of newness that are playing their best, at least for November. We're not playing our best. Like I just mentioned, I feel like there are times where we're better in practice from a competitive standpoint, from an execution standpoint, than we are in games. And certainly there are distractions in game that you have to avoid. That that's why you do it sometimes. But we're definitely a work in progress, and I keep trying to get them to understand, like, we've just got to really old school have a mantra of getting better and soaking up everything that we can in every film session and every practice session and every walkthrough, so we as a group can get the growth that's required, all year long, but especially early. Especially early. We're still trying to find what our identity is going to be. And I've said this before. I know what I want our identity to be, and it's my job to try to get them to grab a hold of it and buy into it. And we're not there yet. We're just not there yet. But we're going to keep charging forward and working our tail off, and they're going to keep doing the same. And hopefully in short order, that identity will be formed and everyone will see it. But until then, as you can see, we have a lot of struggles in games, some longer than others, and it needs to be figured out sooner than later.
Coach, another quote-unquote neutral site game, I guess you could say, with Kansas State being in the backyard, Kansas City, I think. Just talk about, it's going to probably be a lot like the Iowa State game, so just talk about maybe what the team might react to that a little bit better this time, maybe.
Well, we've already done it once, so I won't be walking out in as freezing of cold weather, using that analogy. But it'll be bigger. That was an intimate environment at the Pentagon. It was really cool, really neat place to play, but it was very small and intimate. But this will be like an NBA arena. It'll be large, and people won't be quite on top of you, but there'll be a lot more people in the gym, and like you mentioned, it definitely will be more purple than maroon with the proximity to their campus. But like always, I'm looking forward to seeing how we compete in that environment and how we stick together in that environment. But it'll definitely feel like a road game for sure.
We'll go back to Paul.
Coach, just wanted to check and see how Jamar was doing since his situation. I know you told us there was no structural damage. Just seeing how he's responded since then.
Yeah, I'm not at liberty to say yet. I haven't seen our team yet today. He was definitely in pain yesterday. But again, it's still not a structural situation. But, time will tell. Hopefully he'll continue to rehab with Bryce and get it to where he's game ready. But I haven't seen the team yet today, so I don't know where he's at.
We'll go back to the front row middle with David and then Sam.
Your November signings have been fairly consistent in the numbers. Do you approach that with kind of a set number of guys you want, or is it kind of take what's available out there with the idea that the portal is so far away?
That's a great question, and it varies. A lot of it has to do with, where your team's at, what you think you're going to need. But like you said, it's more difficult now with the portal looming, not knowing who's going to be in the portal, not know who's going to be retained from your own team. So it's a lot of guessing that goes on, unfortunately. But for me, it's like we recruit a bunch of guys, obviously, like everybody does. And then in the end, if we think they're a priority recruit and we got a legitimate chance to get them, and in the negotiations, it's where we think it should be, then we're not in a position to be turned down, players that we think that can move the needle. So we don't necessarily have a number, especially in this day and age. In the past, I think you really did because it was more structured. You knew going into a certain fall or spring, you were going to have to sign a bigger class. And in the past, everybody, for basketball, it was like the good players sign in the fall. That was when you signed most of your players, and it's changed now drastically. But for us, we could have signed 2, right? 3, 4, 5. It didn't have a set number. We had guys that we believed in, guys that we wanted, guys we identified, got to know. And obviously it's still not over yet with the signing period.
Time for a few more, Sam, and then back to Jacob.
With Achor just playing against his former team this week, what do you just think of what he's brought in his game so far this season?
He as one that, as I mentioned earlier about our team, hasn't performed as well in the games as he has in practice. He's been around a little bit, so I fully expect him to get practice into the game a little bit better. I mean, he's proven that he can shoot the basketball, and I think he's 1 for 6, from the 3, and he's much better at that in practice. And a bright spot for him and for us is, he's been one of our, if not the most consistent rebounder that we've had, again, not just in the games, but in practice. He's proven to be a responsible rebounder and a guy that can track the ball down and, compete, on the backboards, especially on the defensive end. And then the offensive end, he does some of that too. And then really, for the most part, makes really good decisions on if he thinks he can get it back up on the glass, depending on the traffic, or, kick it out for an open 3 that, has become very popular in college basketball. So he kind of mirrors our team. He's a work in progress as well. He's shown some decent things, but definitely got some room where he could even help us more.
Coach, you mentioned going against Haggerty last year. I mean, have you noticed anything different about his game now that he's on kind of a new roster with new guys around him?
Not really. I mean, he had the ball in his hands a lot last year too. He's just prolific in the open court. He's got such great size. He's put him in lots of different ball screens and lots of different angles. And, the other guys on the team, I'm sure, love playing with him because, he can go out and get his own, but he likes to set other people up as well. And he's just a lot to handle. I'm sure most coaches that are preparing for him and talking about him prior to the game are saying similar things. He's very, very good at drawing fouls. He's got a knack for it. He's unbelievable at it, to be honest, with just reading and seeing where the defenders are and, playing off 2 and giving a shot fake or a head fake and, the defense biting on it. And he just has a knack for, putting his body in harm's way, if you will, and taking advantage of making the officials, call it. And it's something that, we're going to work on, obviously, till we're blue in the face, but I'm sure most people do. And then you get in the game and you get frustrated because he continues to draw fouls on you. But, he's a year older, a year stronger, a year more experienced, but he's still, very, very similar that way.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right, guys.